to just say thank you guys for coming to our sustainability today. I believe it's the last one of the semester, so I appreciate it. And I know maybe it'll be a good break from everyone's studying for finals and things like that. I'm Annie. I'm a peer educator.
And I'm Emma. I'm a peer educator as well.
So yeah, today we're going to be talking about consumerism and the way that consumerism has an impact on sustainability and on sustainability, and especially on trying to have a focus on the way that it's really intertwined with all three of the pillars of sustainability.
So if we go into defining consumerism, we're going to be using the story of stuff, which is a great video. If you haven't seen it already, it goes into what consumerism is and how it affects the planet and profit. So the story of stuff explains that the process for the materials economy includes extraction, production, distribution, consumption, and disposal. So I've created a little chart here, as you can see. So the extraction has a lot to do with the environment, as does the disposal. But if we look at production and consumption, that typically will relate to social patterns like social equity and economics as well. And then distribution is heavily focused on economics, but with newer companies taking over the market like Amazon and the deliver to your door features, they are also, distribution is also taking a toll on the environment now as well. So what is the problem? So the problem is that we live on a finite planet. We only have so many resources and so many ways that we can, things and ways that we can produce things. So if we are in this linear system that's only going one way, we have no cycle. It's a one and done. So you have the extraction, production, distribution, consumption, and disposal. And once we hit disposal, we're not able to start over, and that finite resource is then used and gone. So our system is now in crisis because we have yet to come up with a cycle that is effective and to the extent that we need it to be in order to have a successful consumerism that is also sustainable. So another problem is that some people in this scenario do matter more than others. So in this case, the corporations are the main people, the main guys. They're the big people in charge. So we have the corporations, and then below the corporations, directly under, there's the government. So the government is in charge of creating the policies for the corporations and the people and the consumers as well. Then you have the workers, the consumers, the workers, the consumers, and the workers. And the reason I listed this out so many times was because some workers, like CEOs, they make a lot of money and they don't do as much physical labor as, say, somebody in a different country who's creating your t-shirt. So the social equity in this chain is very important to note, because even though it's worker consumer, the workers that matter more are often not the ones who are being neglected. So it's very important that we do find this balance as well. And then if we take a look behind the government or behind the corporations, the government is always going to be there as well. So we're finding that this pattern is occurring where the government is behind some of what the corporations are doing. So if we want the corporations to start making a difference and to start trying to create a cycle instead of a linear pattern, the government is very much in charge of how that will happen. So it depends on how they interact with the corporations, but the corporations are increasing the economy and the government likes when the economy is good. So it's a very sticky situation in terms of sustainability and finding a balance.
Yeah, so that was a wonderful explanation of things, Emma. So just kind of jumping into some of the statistics. So in the 2017 Carbon Majors report, it was found, and they compile a bunch of information about different corporations and things like that, and kind of their impact. And they basically found that there are 100 companies, and those 100 companies are responsible for over 70% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. So all of the greenhouse gas emissions in the world, those 100 companies are responsible for 70% of them, which I think that's pretty mind blowing. When I found that out, I was like, that feels unfathomable to me because 100 companies create that much, but that's not even including all of the other companies and corporations in the world that contribute to the greenhouse gas emissions. So I think that this is just a statistic that makes me think a lot about what I'm consuming. And it kind of challenges me to reevaluate the things that I'm consuming and where I am choosing to allocate my money and just the companies I'm choosing to support. But I definitely also recognize, and it's an important thing to recognize, that just because you realize this or you know this, not everyone has the privilege to be able to change like the companies and corporations that they do support just because of money, and that does often play a role in this. Could you go to the next slide? Thank you. So one specific industry within consumerism that is just like has a huge environmental impact is the fashion industry, and that has only grown in recent years. The impact that it has is really, it boomed. So fast fashion has become a kind of like a hot topic in the sustainability world. And basically, fast fashion is the very quick production and very cheap production of clothes to keep up with trends and fads. And basically, it's becoming very evident that this is very harmful and has very negative environmental impact. So I have this quote here that it's basically been determined that the global fashion industry emits 1.7 billion tons of carbon dioxide every year, which actually is more than is produced by all international flights and shipping. So if you think about that, that is such a huge, huge portion of the CO2 that's going into the world, and it's just also a huge portion of CO2 in general. So it makes me think a lot about the ways that I can try to be supporting more locally owned businesses, or more uh, or even just things that are made domestically in the United States, or shopping at thrift stores or secondhand stores, which a lot of times can actually be cheaper as well. So I think that it's just a very important thing that I think not a lot of people realize, is that the fashion industry has a huge impact on the environment. And so while thinking about the fashion industry and its environmental impact, it's important to note Black Friday and Cyber Monday, which are huge days for consumerism. Probably, I mean, I don't have the data on it, but I would assume two of the biggest, if not the biggest days for consumerism annually. So I just encourage you guys to be mindful and thoughtful about the way that you're spending as we come up to those days and to the holidays, and kind of think about maybe prioritizing being a little bit more sustainable in your shopping, and if you can do that, if that's something that you can do, trying to just prioritize the way that you're allocating your money. So yeah, if you want to go to the next slide. So going off of the environmental impacts, then there's also some very alarming social and economic impacts that the fashion industry, specifically the fast fashion industry, has. And so a couple of just kind of topics to introduce to y'all. So free trade and fair trade are words that I think are kind of thrown around sometimes, but they're not always explained. So free trade is basically trade where the regulations and restrictions on taxes are more limited. So there's a lot more kind of free reign for corporations and companies to do what they please and to kind of trade with who they please. And it's often a way that they can choose to be in business with people that they're going to be able to make a lot of profit off of. And it lowers the prices of international trade significantly. The difference with fair trade is that fair trade is an alternative that requires the people that are working to be paid a living wage. There's a lot more regulations in the workplace, and it's just more regulated in general. That trade is just kind of more. There's more that goes to it. There's more in it. Anyway, sorry. So the fact of the matter is fair trade is often more expensive because it actually requires people to be paid a living wage and an amount that is you know, fair for the work that they put into it. But the price to pay is it's about equal equity, and it's about supporting people and not contributing to people who are working for wages that are just kind of unfathomable to the people living in the United States. Um, so it's a lot to think about, but it's important because um, you know, it's sometimes spending that little bit more money, if that's something that you can do, can have a really big impact on the people that are being directly impacted by where your money is being spent. And then just down at the bottom, those are just kind of some little things to think about. Like there is a lot to weigh in where we spend our money and what and how that affects different people and different, you know, how it affects the economy, how it affects on a global and a local level, and then how it affects the people that are contributing to that.
So another common place we see consumerism, or we often see consumerism, is in the food stores and in the grocery stores. So when you're shopping for food, you often see some of these trademarks or some of these stamps on the food that you're consuming. And while all of these look well and good, sometimes it's hard to decipher what they mean and how one might be better than the other or which one you should be prioritizing. So in this case, we have a little explanation for you on what each of these mean. So fair trade is certify transactions between companies to ensure that safe conditions protecting the environment build sustainable livelihood, just like Annie was saying, but this is in terms of food production. And then USDR organic is when there is a plan in place that makes sure that people are limiting the amount of pesticides that they use and making no pesticide use at all. They're making good choices when it comes to seed sourcing, soil, crop rotation, weeds and pest management, water systems, all of those sorts of things. So there's a little check mark that gets crossed off when you meet all of these requirements. And to be USDA organic, you do have to meet these regulations in a very specific way. So sometimes it is very challenging for people to be qualified as USDA organic. So the non-GMO project is working to stop genetic modification of your food products in general. So they work again a little bit with the seed sourcing and making sure that anything that is growing has not been tampered with in a lab or anything like that. So they want to provide the most up-to-date, accurate information when it comes to the science behind how food is produced and making sure that food is being produced naturally if that's what you prioritize. Sometimes people get confused and they think that USDA organic also means non-GMO, but that is not the case. So just because something has been grown without pesticides and it's been grown under these natural circumstances, it might not be necessarily a completely natural product. So that's very important to keep in mind. Rainforest Alliance is working to protect the rainforest. Again, like the USDA organic, there's a checklist that needs to be needs to reach a certain score in order to be Rainforest Alliance certified. So this is another way to protect animals, protect the goodness of the earth, be environmentally conscious. Certified humane is really important when it comes to any food product that was once a living thing. So if you are not a vegetarian, but you want to be making conscious decisions in terms of how lives are being treated, it's very important that you look for certified humane because it promotes the fair treatment and raising of livestock. So that's also really important. Consumer confusion. So we know all of these trademarks are important and that they have different meanings, but it's often really hard to choose how we want to prioritize which tags we're looking for and which ones we're making the purchase for. So one really great example is when you're shopping for eggs. There's cage-free, range-free. or free range, pasture raised, organic, enhanced with omega-3 fatty acid, and vegetarian eggs. So these are all of your common options. And if you get cage free, that means that they're not in a cage, but they might not see sunlight. So even though they're not in a cage, they are indoors most of the time. So that's really important to note, that these animals you think would be out running in the fields actually never see sunlight. Range or free range is when they are out in the field. But if they're out in the field, they might not be eating exactly what they need to be eating. So they might be eating weeds or pastures that have been sprayed with pesticides. So you could be consuming that secondhandly as well. So that's important to keep in mind, because those things aren't regulated when you have free range eggs. Pasture raised eggs are, again, they're outdoors, everybody's happy. They don't have like to be in a certain place when they lay their eggs. Like the people go out and actually collect them from the fields. However, pasture raised are often raised for meat. So you're basically exploiting the chicken to the fullest. So it's really important to note that that is the case when you're doing that. So even though they have the best life in terms of environment, they might not be in the best situation. And then vegetarian eggs I found was really interesting. I thought all eggs were vegetarian, but it turns out that they are not, because most chickens are actually fed meat products. So you would be secondhandly consuming meat products if you are a vegetarian and you do not get vegetarian eggs. So when we come to milk, that's another really hot topic now. Everybody's worried about whether they're getting oat milk, almond milk, soy milk. So this shows you what actually is worth consuming. So when you do have to make this choice, dairy is obviously the worst, which I think a lot of us have figured out. But a lot of us go towards almond milk. And what we don't realize is that almonds take a lot of water to produce, especially if they're produced in California where there's a lot of drought. Like you're just using water that you don't have. So it's very important to keep that in mind when seeing where you're sourcing your almonds from, or if you're using almond milk at all. So this is just a little chart that shows you the difference between those things. So this conversation with yourself just keeps going down the line. It goes for coffee, where you see literally all of the trademarks that we saw before. And sometimes you see multiple. And then you have yogurts as well. So I don't know if any of you have had similar conversations with yourself, but when I am going through the grocery store, this is pretty much how it goes. If I buy soy-based yogurt, it's good for the environment, but it comes in a number 5 plastic. Plus, they say women shouldn't be eating too much soy. And what about soy production? It never says anything about fair trade. So I can afford oat milk, but in the recyclable container. But if I get that, that means I have to ditch the organic apples. And then never mind, if I go to the farmer's market, I can afford half the amount of produce I would be getting at the supermarket, and it's local, which is great. But where will I be getting my protein from? Because I don't have the budget to buy enough protein now. And so will I be getting chicken from the frozen section? So I don't know if any of you have had a similar conversation, but this is the way we have to learn to balance what it is we're buying, and it can be overwhelming. So it's really important that we're aware of what we are consuming and how these tags do make a difference, not only on the environment, but on the economy and social equity as well. So with this being said, does any of this actually matter? If you're going through and having these conversations with yourself, are you actually able to make a difference based on what you buy? So if you buy one but not the other, does that balance itself out at the end of the day? So we're living in a society where cheapness is key. So everything is produced to be cheap. And Raj Patel is a really famous in the academia. And he says that if you're interested in systemic change, you can't do that by shopping differently. The way that you are powerful is not by what you put in your basket, but how you organize to transform your society. So if we go back to the first slide that I showed you all, we have the corporations are number 1, but the governments are feeding the corporations and supporting the corporations. So if we want to make a difference, we have to go to the government to make them make the regulations that the corporations will have to follow. And if we can't do that, we need to support corporations that are making an effort to be sustainable, but we also have to be sure that we are understanding what it means to be sustainable by understanding these tags and how they affect the environment. So the more you're aware, the more you understand what's actually going on and what you're buying, like Annie was doing a great job of explaining, is how you can make a difference. But if we want systemic change, at the end of the day, consumer confusion in the grocery store, not always, isn't the way you make a difference. It's who we elect, it's how we protest, how we show corporations what we want and what we'll buy. So just be aware of the confusion, but make the decision that's best for you and hope that it's best for the environment too. But at the end of the day, you need to do what you need to do.
So going off of what Emma was just saying, I I feel that for me, I try to do the best that I can when it comes to the stores that I pick to shop at, and sometimes like that means limiting shopping. Like if I'm like, oh, I want to go to the thrift store, I'm like, but let me rethink that. Do I need to go? Do I need more things? But then also it is just really important to remember that there's not, it is a lot. There's a grander scheme of things that have a major impact on the effects of consumerism, and we by default are consumers. I mean, that's the way that humanity works. So at the end of the day, you have to recognize that you have to consume. You have to take in and contribute to that. So, but just some things that you can do is, if you have the privilege of choice in where you shop, choose to shop more locally or smaller owned businesses. Do your research and find, hey, I've usually been shopping at Food Lion, but I just found this awesome little grocery store that is owned by somebody from Wilmington. I'm going to start going there. Or even if it's not a locally owned business or something, there are a lot of resources out there that can kind of give you a broken down evaluation of different stores, so that you can really compare and contrast. Well, I don't really like that this store supports this person, but they also are a little bit better when it comes to sustainability. Oh, but this person, yeah, this store, and so you can kind of do that research for yourself and find what it is that you like best about each individual stores. And if you search the Good Shopping Guide, or really if you just search any sort of sustainable shopping guide, there are countless of them out there on the internet. Um, Another thing you should be on the lookout for as we come into the holiday season, which is a time when we spend a lot of money as a culture. Sustained is working on a social justice guide to sustainability, which just kind of has some good tips about ways that you can be a little bit more conscious about your sustainable actions during the holidays. So keep an eye out for that. And I think it's just really the underlying point is, it's important to be conscious of how we are consuming and what effect our consumption is having. But again, also trying to make choices that are also going to enact change on a larger scale, like Emma was saying.
Yeah, we can only do the best that we can do. So take it one day at a time and be conscious of opportunities to do better. But you can only do what you can do. So these are our sources if you're interested in taking a look at where we got our information from. But that is our presentation. So thank you very much for watching. And thank you, Annie, for being my partner for the sustainability.
Yeah, thank you, Emma. Does anybody have any questions about any of the stuff that